I did know what the back of the ship was. What did they call it? But even going like the bulkhead, I found out that's the wall. Bulkhead is the wall. So I had to learn all these terms. We were so green. But the only thing we did do, we were on the ship, we all given a Mae West to wear, a lifesaver jacket to wear. And then I think also they had life-saving belts if you didn't want to wear a jacket. So, but we wore them all the time for a while. For a while we wore them, for a while. Then after a while we got like everything else, you forget about them, and then the fear was gone, I think. You forget about maybe you could be torpedoed or anything like that. It wasn't hitting us right there that we're going into warfare, to tell you the truth. We're just traveling. So then that's when I finally, we didn't go right there. I think we stopped at one of the islands. I think we stopped at one of the islands to pick up the troops and all that. I'm sure we did, to pick up troops. Because our ship was going to go to Lady. That was the first invasion I was on. We went to Lady, and I can't tell you the exact date of Lady. I have to look it up in the history book. But so that's.
So that was the first invasion that you were involved in. Was
a Lady, L-E-Y-T-E, Lady.
And you had troops aboard ship.
Yeah, we had troops. And,
okay.
Yeah.
And you weren't involved with the troops that were aboard ship.
On the board ship, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so did the troops then landed on Lady?
Yeah.
And then did you stand by as a hospital ship?
Yeah.
And receive casualties?
Well, what we did all the way over to Lady, on our way over to Lady, we made what we call 4x4s. There were bandages, 4 inches by 4 inches. We would take the cloth and we'd make a bandage, cut and make the bandage. We made many, many, many bandages because we didn't know how many casualties we'd have. We'd have to use them for like to stop the blood and all that stuff. We did that on the way over. And I remember being in the convoy and everything. And when we got there were so many ships. But I think I saw more at this other place too. But there were so many ships. And of course, we carried small boats. And that's how the invasion works. The morning of the invasion, everybody's up early, had a good breakfast, all that. And then the men got loaded into the small boats. The small boats got loaded, got put down the water. And then they would circle the ship until it was time for the attack. But there was a lot of ships like ours doing the same thing. So when the time for the attack was done, and all those small boats were going in at one time. And our ship was always anchored too far off the shore to hear any noise. I couldn't hear any noise. And sometimes you could see a tank or something. I did at one of the islands. And I saw a flag at one of the islands too. But we're too far away. But it would be later in the afternoon when the casualties start coming in. And that same night, that the D-Day on Lady, the same night, us 13 temporary corpsmen got transferred to another ship where they probably needed more help. And I guess they get the casualties depending how they're lined up for casualties, I suppose. Some gets a lot of ships, some gets a lot of casualties, some don't. So I don't remember too many casualties at Lady. I know there was plenty. I know there was a lot, but my ship probably didn't get that many.
So what would you do during the
time? During, on one of the ships I remember, but I'm getting ahead of myself at Evo, but on one of the ships I remember, my job was to hand down sandwiches to the working crew that were unloading all the vehicles on the ship. Besides the men going in, this crew, their job was unloading the ship, and they'd get it all unloaded in one day or so. But I was standing there when they come in, I'd hand down sandwiches to them, maybe a drink too, whatever it was, until we got casualties. Once we got casualties, they needed me in the sick bay, and then I would go in the sick bay. But by that time, the ship was probably pretty well unloaded late in the afternoon, you know, something like that.
Did you get to meet or know any of the rest of the staff, like the doctors and?
Yeah, oh yeah. When I knew the doctors. And only one guy I remember the name was the senior. I guess most ships, I think, like ours, carry 3 doctors. 2 were young doctors, and 1 was a senior doctor, older doctor. And the older doctor's name was Dr. Matros. I remember that name, Dr. Matros. And when they were younger doctors were stumped on something, but probably they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were. It was trying to save lives. But when it comes to probably crucial operations or whatnot, maybe Dr. Matros was there to help them, or do the work, step in. But I don't know. I was never in this. Well, I was in the sick bay, but I can't remember Lady too much. Maybe it wouldn't.
Let's pick up then on. There were other islands that you were off of, but we get to February of '45 was the main battle, and that was the Battle of Iwo Jima that you were involved in.
Right.
And it's, in fact, it's mentioned in a book, which if you can hold up this copy of the book, so that, because there's an excerpt in here of yours, just so we can see that. Yeah, it's called Never in Doubt, Remembering Iwo Jima, and there's a chapter devoted to you in that book where you tell about your experiences off of Iwo Jima. So I would like you now to pick up on the story of Iwo Jima through Emile Lareau's eyes, what happened going into the battle and how that all unfolded in your perspective.
Well, I get to know some of the people who went in, the Marines, because we get together at night. Sometimes we probably play cards or do things, you know, but you get to them. I never got to know them close, but I guess fairly well. And that morning, I remember talking to one man, and I realized he probably wanted to be alone, alone probably with his prayers or whatnot. But they, excuse me a minute. They finally, they went over, the command came in to go overboard, and they landed in small boats. And then I watched them circle the ship for a while. And I was very fortunate, I thought, that I never had to go in. I never had to leave any of the ships I was on. But I think it was pretty tough for those guys to go in. And as everyone knows today, it was a very tough, bloody battle. But my job that day, I remember though, was handing down sandwiches particularly. And later in the afternoon, around 2 o'clock, we saw a flag on the island. And we looked through the telescope, we could see it, then we looked through the telescope and was sure we saw the flag. And all these years, I thought that was the flag that was most famous. I found out years later that it wasn't. They had put up a flag, we're right about that, but the flag that was most famous was put up a little bit later around and back of the mountain. There was a mountain in front of us, and it was around back of the mountain, so we never could have seen the famous flag, but I thought that was it all these years. But then that same as happened at the other ships, that night, D-Day, that night, they transferred us over to the President Jackson. And the President Jackson got an awful lot of casualties, many casualties. And the Jackson, too, was noted that it was the first ship that landed on Guadalcanal. So these ships had been in a lot of service before. They got a lot of casualties. And I was put in a compartment where me and this other fella had 50 or 52 bed patients. The compartment next to me had a 250 or 225 patients, but they were ambulatory, they could walk. But our patients couldn't get out of bed. One fella did get out of bed. He tried twice. He passed out twice on us. So we put him back. And I guess he was and I guess he would be embarrassed to use a bedpan. So he waited at nighttime, and we got him out of bed into the aisle. And that's when he used the bedpan, things like that. But these fellas kept us busy. And Charlie, we never stopped a moment because of 50 bed patients. When you're walking by a bed to get somebody, say water, the other guy would ask for a urinal, another guy would ask for a bedpan, another guy had pain, would ask for a morphine shot. And this was a continual thing, and some would just get a pill, but it was a continual thing all the time. Me and this fella was working. And I think we slept about 4 hours a night if we slept that much. We didn't sleep much. I had one patient say to me, "When do you sleep? Well, you're always here, we never see you." And that was why we didn't sleep much. And I said to him, "Well, you know, you guys did your job on the beach. Started trying to do our job here." And we did. And I'm thankful to say that I think we did a good job as far as giving all the service we could give. And at one point, I had to go to sick bay to get something from one of my patients. And as I'm going to sick bay, there was this fellow in the bottom bunk, and he had a leg missing. And he said to me, Corman, he said, could you clean me up? He still had sand on him from the beach and whatnot. And I said, okay. And I knew I was in a hurry to get back to my own patients, but I couldn't resist them. So I got a washcloth or whatever I had to get, and I cleaned them up. And as I turned around, there was another fella on the other side, the same thing. He had a leg missing. And I had to say to him, would you want me to clean you up also? And he said, no. He must have known I had to get back. He said, no, that's okay. Then there was another time I was in a sick bay for something. I think it was 2 doctors carrying a stretcher across. And one doctor was taking the pulse and temperature of this patient they're carrying. And he said to the other doctor, and the other doctor was feeding him the blood. He was holding the blood up high, feeding him the blood as they're walking. And the doctor taking the pressure and all that said, save the blood. He said, he's gone. Died right there. I've seen a few other things that would happen. And also on one time when they were, I think that was the ship that they were on, and a small boat was coming back. It was out all night, it got lost, they're coming back. And I guess the rule of the ship was that you couldn't stay in a boat when they hoisted the boat on the deck. You had to climb the ladder. Get out of the boat, climb the ladder. So, but the lieutenant who was in charge, he came up and he asked the officer of the day if he could have permission to leave 2 men on the boat while they hoisted it up because they were sick. And they got permission. So they hoisted the boat up and they got it half over the side of the ship, and the winch broke, and the boat fell. Everything went in the water except the bow. Well, there was a fellow standing on the bow holding the cable as they were raising the boat. He fell in the water and he wasn't hurt. But there was another fellow, if we looked down, he floated up. He had his Mae West on. He floated up and his head was in the water. And we were calling to pick his head out of the water. But before that, we were pulling on the cable. A whole bunch of us were pulling. We couldn't budge the boat. We were trying to get the boat up out of the water. We couldn't budge it. So anyway, soon after that, a boat did come around and picked up the guy that was floating, and the other guy said, and I saw that man who floated up the next day, and I talked to him, and he was okay. He was okay. But we did lose one on the boat. There was at least one on the boat that went down with that, when that happened. And I can't think of too many other things that evil that.
So your experience off of Iwo Jima went on for about how long? A couple of days, a week?
No, we were there 15 days, I think. I would say the first 3 or 4 or 5 days. Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. The first 3 days we took care of these patients by ourselves. The doctors didn't see them anymore. They were too busy working the sick bay trying to save lives. After they got through with the sick bay, this other doctor's kind of young. He came in to take care of my patients. And the chow hall was right next to my department. So all we had to do was take them off the bunks and go in the chow hall, and they set up a table where they could lay them on, and he gave them penicillin, whatever puts you to sleep. I forgot what it was. I think it was penicillin, something like that. It was a drug. It was kind of new. They use it today, but they know how to regulate it and everything. But again, and we'd have the guys to count backwards from 20. When you get to be about 13, they fall asleep and he'd do the operating. But the main thing I bring out about this doctor was, I think he was supposed to go in on the beach party. I've heard the story. I don't know if that's true. I heard the story, but he couldn't get himself to go in, and he stayed on board ship. It seemed like he was going to make up for what he didn't do, and he took care of all those patients. He took him. And then when they were all fixed up, ready to go back to the bunk, I went to carry the stretcher, and he pushed me aside. He wouldn't let me carry the stretcher. He carried it back himself with the other guy. Carry that. And I think it was meant to be like that guy was meant to stay on board ship of all the good he did. It's really, really good.
And you mentioned that some doctors did go in with the landing party.
One doctor did. Well, there's one doctor, the other doctor stayed on board ship. this doctor was supposed to go with the landing party, but also there was another doctor that went in with all the landing parties on the stand. And he must be one of the bravest guys there ever was to go in there.
Remember what his name was?
But no, I don't remember his name. But he went in. And how he made out, I don't. Well, you know, he came back because it would have hurt if he didn't come back. Yeah.
During the time that you're on ship, you mentioned already about sandwiches and food. Talk a little bit about what kind of food were you serving or being served? Well,
we had a regular kitchen, and they served. It was good food. We had potatoes. We had. I can't think of what we had now. Let's have different kinds of meat. We ate well in the trays, and that's how we fed the bed patients too. By the way, when these fellas who were in the other compartment who were ambulatory would go to the chow hall to get something to eat, I stopped them and say, "When you come back, would you bring back a tray for one of my patients?" They said, "Sure." They all agreed. So everybody got fed that way. Otherwise, me and this other guy couldn't carry all those trays back ourselves. So they did. And
you were helping feed your patients. Some of them had to be helped.
Actually, I don't remember feeding any of my patients. I don't remember. We had bad cases. One arm, his hand was off. Another guy, I think, was broken back. Another broken legs, and they were bed patients, all right. But I think they could eat themselves. I suppose if they needed help, and I think the guys in the other department probably come through and it kind of helped them a little bit. They didn't help very much, but I think if somebody needed something, they would help. There was no problem.
Then what happens to the patients as they improve? How do they are they transferred somewhere?
No, like I mentioned before, the doctors were busy for 3 days, but when they finally got a little bit of sleep, they came down and redid the patients again, looked at the patients, see how our patients were going, because they must have saved the lives of the other patients, and somebody watched them. They could be called back right away if they had to be. So I'm sure they came down and took care of our patients. But this little guy took care of all and fixed the wounds that one day. I think he did it all that one day.
And so the patients eventually would leave you. They would go back to their companies. What would happen?
No. When we get back to a neutral base after